interesting part of Spring Boot is its auto configuration. If I add Hibernate specific dependencies into class path, Spring Boot auto configures Hibernate. If I add Spring Web specific dependencies into class path, Spring Boot auto configures that. So anything you add into the class path, it automatically configures that specific module. That is the coolest thing about Spring Boot. As part of this demonstration, I'll show how to integrate Spring Boot with Spring Data JPA. The underlying JPA implementation is going to be Hibernate. So after integrating Boot with JPA, I'll also show one demo to persist employee data into MySQL database server. Using Spring Starter framework, I want to add the dependencies I need for this specific demonstration. Data JPA is one I need, followed by MySQL driver. So make sure we add Spring Data JPA and MySQL driver. So click OK. So that selection adds the dependency details into pom.xml JPA, and it's also including MySQL driver jar file, right? And I need to provide my MySQL server details, the JDBC URL, username, password, and for JPA I need to provide a couple of other options. What I have done is I already added those details into this application.properties file. When you run Spring Boot application, Spring Boot picks the inputs from here as part of its auto configuration mechanism. So I'm telling my Hibernate JPA to automatically create schema, create tables. This is my JDBC URL, username, password, the driver class name, and also the dialect. I'm telling we are using MySQL, so it has to generate queries using MySQL specific syntaxes. So that's all from the configuration side. So when you go and run your Spring Boot application, you could see the log, console log, which says it's configured. Let's open this Spring Boot application, run it. If you see this one, Hibernate, data sources, data source pools, all that stuff is created, and there is no exception here. If something is wrong, right, you will see errors or exceptions here. Accordingly, we need to troubleshoot and fix them. In previous video, we stopped at this point. I have shown you how to submit employee data into REST APIs. So from here, I want to take this object and persist this object into MySQL database. So coming back to properties file, I am using MySQL server in cloud, Amazon Web Services. You can have your own database server wherever you want to. You can have it locally, or you can have it on any machine such that your laptop is reachable to that. For persisting data, I want a DAO. DAO stands for Data Access Object. In Java, DAO is used for data access. The logic to access and persist data will sit in DAO. Here I want to create an interface inside DAO module. According to convention, I'm starting this interface name with I. I stands for interface. So it's going to have CRUD operations for employee. So I'm naming it as I employee DAO. This interface I want to extend with CRUD repository. CRUD repository is from a Spring Data Framework. So this CRUD repository comes up with predefined set of methods for all basic CRUD operations like save, select, select all, update, delete, and so on. Using this repository, we're going to do data access on employee. ID is the primary key of employee. It is of type integer, because if you check employee class, integer is the ID that's going to be primary key. Before Spring Data was introduced, we used to have a class and we used to write methods for insert, update, delete, and so on. After Spring Data is introduced, we don't have to write all those methods. They come with default implementation. We have to go and use them instead of implementing them. So this is our Spring Data. Using this in my controller, I want to persist employee object to MySQL. So open controller. I want to have that here. So employee DAO. It is an interface. The implementation is provided by your Spring Data. So I want to auto wire this object. After auto wire, using that object, I want to call save. So save is JPA method for inserting objects into DB. I am passing my employee object for persisting it into DB. But even I should say my JPA, what should be the table and how to deal with the properties in this class. So I need to map my class with a table and properties with a column. So that is done with help of annotations. So whichever object I am passing to my JPA to the same object, I need to add annotations. So so entity. So entity represents table in DB and it represents project class in Java. And make sure we are importing from this specific package. I want to say that ID is primary key. While working with JPA or Hibernate, we need to explicitly mention which property is the primary key part of this class. The rest is optional. I can leave them. Okay, I can leave them. And one more thing before executing the code, I'm using Java Home as a schema. I should create this schema in my MySQL server. So for connecting to MySQL server, I'm going to use JackDB, which is a web-based interface for connecting. Let's open Chrome browser. JackDB. You can log into this with help of your social media websites like Gmail and so on. Let me log in with Gmail. We got into JackDB. Let's go ahead and create a new data source. We want to create data source for MySQL. Display name. Let me select Java Home Spring Boot as a display name. The roles I'm giving read and write. So this is my endpoint. Otherwise, this is my host name of MySQL, which is running in Amazon Cloud. The port is 3306. I'm leaving database name empty. Username is admin and my password. Hit create. If all goes well, it has to successfully create the data source. The next job is to connect. So go to actions and hit connect. we got connected to MySQL server. Now I want to create a schema which is used by our Spring Boot application. So create database. The data source got created successfully. As part of our Spring Boot configuration, we are referring to that data source. So the complete configuration is done. We have to test our application. So let me restart my application because we made a lot of changes after the server got started. So right click, run as a Spring Boot application. Let me see if there are any exceptions. I don't see any exceptions. Okay, so I want to make a call to this REST API by passing employee object. For that, I want to open a Postman for submitting employee details. This is a Postman client. Method is post. The URL is localhost 8080 is the default port. Employee is the path. Go to body. Yeah, so I want to submit this information to my REST API. So REST API in turn talks to DAO, and it will save this object to MySQL. Let's hit on this. It says the object, otherwise the resource created successfully. So if you go to JackDB interface and run, yeah, so the data is persisted successfully into MySQL. If you check employee, right, I didn't give any table name. By default, it creates a table with same as class name. And even I didn't mention what should be the column name for this specific property. So if you observe, it has used property name as a default name for column names. So if you want to change the column names in the table, or if you want to have different table name other than the class name, you have to explicitly mention those details part of annotations. We will see further CRUD operations in next video. Thank you.